This is the Harry Loomis Show. Welcome to the first episode of the Harry Loomis Show. My name is Harry Loomis. Today is July 1st, 2024, and if you're a fan of sports, you know what that means. So much going on in the world of sports. We're going to start with the NHL. Free agency has opened up today. The salary cap going up for the first time in years in the NHL, and teams are taking full advantage of it. We're going to break down some of the big signings so far. And let me tell you, there have been a lot of them. No team is making a bigger impact on the first day of free agency than, drumroll please, the Nashville Predators. Barry Trotz, we know he's one of the best head coaches of the 21st century. Second full offseason as the GM of the Predators, and he is making a huge impression. Listen to these three signings. Jonathan Marchessault, Stanley Cup champion, Conn Smythe winner with the Vegas Golden Knights. He is now a Predator. 5 years, $5.5 million per season. Brady Shea, a very solid left-handed defenseman, formerly of the Carolina Hurricanes. He's now a Predator. 7 years, $7 million. The big one, Steven Stamkos. You know him. Legendary on the Tampa Bay Lightning, probably the best player in franchise history, former 60-goal winner, captained 2 teams to Stanley Cups, and he's now a Predator. 4 years, $8 million per. Barry Trotz trying to make an impression. The Predators were one of the biggest surprises in the National Hockey League last year. No one really knew what to expect from them. They missed the playoffs in 2023. Andrew Brunette comes in, and it clicks. Ryan O'Reilly's a big hit. UC Saros is still one of the best goalies in the league, not to mention they signed him to an 8-year deal. That looks like an absolute steal. Big things are happening with the Predators. They're really establishing themselves, trying to establish themselves as a contender in the Central. We know how good the Central's top teams are. The Avs have won a Stanley Cup in the past 3 years. The Stars have made the conference finals the last 2 years. Winnipeg put up over 100 points last year. The Wild, we know what to expect from them. They had a down year this year. The top of the Central is a mosh pit, and the Predators are going to be a really tough team to contend with. This top 6, all of a sudden, is absolutely loaded. Marchessault and Stamkos join a group headlined by Philip Forsberg, who's got near 50 goal potential. Ryan O'Reilly is one of the best two-way forwards in the game. They've still got a really solid defense headlined by Roman Josi. If you're a fan of a team in the Central, you do not want to face the Predators. That's the best compliment you can give a team like that. Another team in the Central that we should talk about that's making some moves. No one's expecting much from them this year, but how about the Chicago Blackhawks? They are very active on the first day of free agency. They've got the cap space to try to build around Connor Bedard, and they're going for it. Tyler Bertuzzi, a lot of people thought he was going to end up back in Toronto. Things didn't work out after they signed Max Domi and Chris Tanev. We'll get to that in a little bit. They get Tyler Bertuzzi now. Tyler Bertuzzi is a Blackhawk, 4 years, $5.5 million per. Pretty low risk, high reward guy, or signing for a guy like Bertuzzi, who has had really good numbers back in his Detroit days, had a pretty good half season in Boston the year they lost in the first round to the Panthers. Also brought in Laurent Brossoit, 2 years, $6.6 million. We'll see how that works with the goaltending tandem there. Alec Martinez, Stanley Cup champion twice, maybe 3 times. I can't remember if he was on the 2012 team, scored the cup winning goal in 2014, was on that Vegas team in 2023. He signs 1 year, $4 million. Brought in Patrick Maroon on a 1 year, $1.3 million contract. Craig Smith, 1 year, $1 million. And another big signing. How about Teuvo Teravainen, 3 years, back with Chicago on a $5.4 million cap hit. You know, obviously this isn't going to move the Blackhawks from the second worst team in the league all the way up to, you know, wild card contention, but they should be taking baby steps. There's no reason why this team can't get, you know, a high 70 points this year. Bedard's going to take that next step. He looked very good in his first season. No reason why he's not going to continue to improve, continue to work his way into a top 10, top 5 player in the NHL. I really like what the Blackhawks are doing, and they had a really solid draft on top of that. Another team that's trying to make some moves, 2 big moves for the Seattle Kraken, 2 7-year contracts that they gave out. We didn't see a ton of 7-year contracts today, but we saw 2 here. Chandler Stevenson, Stanley Cup champion with the Vegas Golden Knights, 7-year deal at over $6 million per. That's going to be an interesting signing. He worked really well with guys like Mark Stone in Vegas. 7 years, $6 million for a guy turning 30. He's pretty much a shoe-in for 50, 60 points. We'll see how this contract ages over time. And the big one, Brandon Montour is a Seattle Kraken. 7 years, over $7 million per. An offensive defenseman, a power play quarterback. They have Vince Dunn. Dunn pretty much left-handed, plays that exact same role. We'll see how this turns out. You know, I saw this same song and dance with the Blues when they had Vince Dunn. They brought in Torrey Krug to replace Alex Pietrangelo. Next thing you know, Dunn was on his way out to Seattle. The Krug contract looks like an albatross. Obviously, I think Montour's got more upside than Torrey Krug, but we'll see how this plays out. Montour obviously is such a good defenseman. He was so good for the Panthers, especially in 2023. Was pretty good this year in 2024. Won a Stanley Cup, and he's going to cash in. Can't help but feel happy for the guy. While we're at it, we should get to the defending champion Florida Panthers, and they kept Sam Reinhart. That was the big one. They brought Sam Reinhart back. 8 years. They barely got that 8-year contract in time at over $8 million per. Very solid contract for a guy coming off a 57-goal season. Reinhart was absolutely incredible this year. Scored the cup-winning goal, and he's going to cash in. He's probably going to be a Panther for the rest of his career. Hard to have a better contract year than Sam Reinhart had. Dmitry Kulikov also coming back. 4 years, $4.6 million over the course of that contract. That's a great deal for the Panthers. That really helps them on the back end. They also brought in Thomas Nosek on a 1-year, $775,000 contract. One of the bigger moves, one of the teams making some of the more interesting moves this offseason, the Tampa Bay Lightning. People kind of assumed the way talk was going before the draft and during the draft that Steven Stamkos was probably going to leave. He did end up leaving, signing with the Predators, like we mentioned, but it wasn't in vain. They were in a bit of a cap situation, so they went for it, and they traded Mikhail Sergachev to Utah. I love that deal if I'm Utah, but the Lightning freed up some cap, and they shocked everybody, bringing in Jake Gensel, 7 years, $63 million contract. Gensel had a fantastic year, looked so good on the Hurricanes. I really thought that duo was going to stay together. Really thought that was going to end up happening. It sounded like it was going to get done. Elliot Friedman, some guys were reporting 8 years, $8 million was going to be roughly the range for a guy like Gensel. Then Sunday, you hear the news, he got traded to the Lightning. Something changed along the way, but the Lightning are trying to keep that window open. They've still got talent. They've still got one of the best goalies in the league when healthy in Andrei Vasilevsky. They brought back Ryan McDonough. Nikita Kucherov just finished second in hard voting. Braden Point just scored 40 goals once again. This is still a very, very good team. We'll see how they're able to continue to fight in such a good Atlantic division. Boston's having a rough offseason. They traded Linus Ullmark for Korpisalo. They brought in Elias Lindholm on a bit of an overpay. They brought in Nikita Zadorov on a bit of an overpay. We'll see what happens. Toronto, same thing. Maple Leafs, the big signings. Chris Tanev, 6 years, $27 million. He is 34. We will see. This contract will be made or broken in the first 3 years of this. If they can get somewhere with this in the first 3 years, then it'll work. If they're still losing the first round and Tanev is battling injuries, isn't playing like he did this year, this contract will be rough, but they have to because they do not have right defensemen other than Timothy Liljegren. They had to take a chance on a guy like this. But that's just the situation they put themselves in. Also, another overpay, Oliver Ekman-Larsson was having a rough time in Arizona and Vancouver, had a really good bounce-back year. That was great to see, winning a cup with the Panthers. That earned him a 4-year, $14 million contract with the Leafs. He's making $3.5 million per year to play, probably in the bottom pair. You know, that's a fine fit, but not at $3.5 million. So, going to be really interesting to see how that one plays out as well. Couple free agents haven't signed still. Obviously, you know, it's midway through January or July 1st. I made some predictions before the season started, or before the offseason started, and I got to say a lot of them are not coming true. One team that we didn't even talk about, I had Matt Roy going to Buffalo, but he ended up signing with the Washington Capitals. The Capitals, aside from the PLD trade, I kind of like what they're doing in this offseason, man. They brought in Matt Roy. They had maybe the gutsiest trade so far in this offseason, bringing in Jacob Chikrin for Nick Jensen and a third-round pick going back to the Ottawa Senators. If that hits and if they sign him, that is a fantastic deal. Chikrin has all the potential in the world to be one of the best top-line left-handed defensemen in the NHL. The Capitals are trying to keep that window open. Obviously, Ovechkin doesn't have a lot of years left. They want to stay competitive. They don't want to be that team that just barely makes the playoffs with a minus 30 goal differential once again. So they're going to bring in guys like Matt Roy on a 6-year deal. They're going to trade for guys like Jacob Chikrin and Andrew Mangiapane, another deal I like, only cost him a second-round pick. The Metro's tough, man. The East is so good. The Capitals are trying to stay afloat, and we will see how that turns out. A couple guys that haven't signed yet. Jean-Gabriel Pageau is a guy that I thought would end up in Nashville. He has that Barry Trotz connection, just seems like a fit. The Islanders haven't done a whole lot yet. Everyone keeps linking them to Nikolai Ehlers. Will they make a trade for him? What's going to happen with him? They did bring in Anthony Duclair, so we will see what happens there. I think just about every team, other than I think Anaheim's the one I saw, has signed somebody at this point. One team that I think I need to talk about, if you can see my hat, you can tell who it's going to be. The St. Louis Blues. You know, fans are pretty frustrated so far. Team has $16 million in cap space because they traded Kevin Hayes along with a second-round pick to the Penguins for future considerations. If you're giving up a second-round pick, you better have a plan, especially when you're just giving up a player, not getting anything in return. And the only signing is one that they probably shouldn't have made. Kasperi Kapanen is back on a 1-year, $1 million contract. Fans aren't too happy about it. You know, Kapanen, when he first came in, the Blues brought in a bunch of reclamation projects in 22-23 when they were missing the playoffs pretty obviously. Kapanen worked out pretty well. Sammy Blais had a great half season. And Jakob Bryant was scoring at a 40-goal pace. That became a disaster in 23-24. He's a shoo-in to be gone. I haven't heard anything about him today, but he's definitely not going to be back with the Blues. He hasn't even played for the Blues since around November when they sent him down and he never came back up. But Kapanen, there are some points this year, you got to say, where he looked invisible. He wasn't making that much of an impact. The speed is there. The penalty killing is there. You know, he's a guy that could steal the puck and go in transition. He had a bunch of great short-handed goals in Toronto, in Pittsburgh, in St. Louis. That's the best part of his game, but it didn't show up enough. And for the Blues, where is he going to go? You traded for Alexander Texier. In theory, this should fill the same role, that third-line winger position. If you have Kapanen and Texier on the same line, I don't have a lot of confidence in that third line. I'm not really sure what the Blues could do. There are a couple players that they were linked to that some fans liked the idea of, some fans didn't like the idea of. Jonathan Drouin their Blues were linked to that. A lot of fans wanted them to look at a guy like Sean Monahan, who got 5 years, $5.5 million in Columbus, or a guy like Chandler Stevenson, who nobody expected to get $7 million in Vegas, 7 years, $6 million, in Seattle. I don't know why I said Vegas. So I'm not sure the fits were there for the Blues. I think it was kind of clear that they were going to try to really start working day two, kind of see who hasn't found a home yet, maybe get someone on a discount. David Perron would have been a guy that fans would have loved to bring back. You know, he's had 3 tenures with the Blues. He's an Ottawa Senator, 2 years, $4 million for him. So knowing Doug Armstrong, it doesn't really seem like free agency is going to be the biggest place for this team to try to make moves. Knowing Armstrong is probably going to come with a trade. A couple guys that are interesting. Nick Robertson is requesting a trade from the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's battled injuries. He hasn't really established a consistent role there. He seemed like he would have been a great fit for a coach like Craig Berube, but he's going to request a trade. We'll see what happens there. That would be a guy the Blues could potentially be interested in. And also Shane Pinto, the center for the Ottawa Senators, has requested a trade. They couldn't come to an agreement there. He's a restricted free agent. Another guy that I think the Blues should be kicking the tires on, calling the Senators and just seeing what the asking price is. You know, the Blues have plenty of young prospects. Does it include a guy like Scott Perunovich? Does it include, you lost your second-round pick? Are any guys available that you're willing to give up your first for? What about a guy like Zach Dean, who you got in the Ivan Barbashev trade? You know, you've got guys like Bolduc, who's probably going to be an everyday player. Dvorsky's got all the potential in the world. Jimmy Snuggerud looks like a great pick. Who's expendable? And are the Blues going to try to make any moves with them because they're saying they don't want to rebuild and build around those guys. They want to retool. Right now, they seem to be in no man's land. I think the bigger issue for them, instead of trying to sign a free agent, is to try to spend this cap fixing the defense. You tried that with trading Torrey Krug last year. Didn't happen. You would have brought in, I don't know why the name's, why I'm blanking on the name. Travis Sanheim. I don't know why that took a minute to get to me. We're going to bring in a guy like Travis Sanheim. Probably was going to cost you first round pick. That didn't happen. We'll see. The Blues are really, like I said, in no man's land. It feels like the worst place they can be in. But how do they get out of it? That's going to be the big question. But we've got plenty of time to talk about the NHL moves. We've got plenty of time to talk about the Blues. There's a lot going on. Really exciting day. You love to see all this movement, all these transactions taking place in the NHL. It's an exciting time to be a fan. We'll see how they all turn out come October. But we're going to call that segment for now. Coming up after the break, my good friend Kenan Bjelevac will be with me for NBA free agency talk here on the Harry Loomis Show. Obviously, there's a lot going on today, July 1st. Not only is it NHL free agency starting up, not only is it Bobby Bonilla Day, we've also got NBA free agency starting up. So with me is my good friend Kenan Bjelevac out of St. Louis. Kenan, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, bro. Just trying to keep up on these NBA free agents. Best time of the year in the offseason. Lots of changes, lots of pieces coming in and out, and one of my favorite times of the year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got a weird love for off season. Obviously, you're a basketball guy. I've been talking about hockey, but there's something exciting about seeing players that we know going to new teams. It gets you excited to see how the season starts, how these new players look, wear new jerseys, potentially new numbers, completely new rosters. So it's going to be a really exciting time.
Oh, 100%, man. Just come October, you see everybody in their new jerseys. Faces are moving across the league right now.
Faces are moving, and we're going to get right into it. One team that is bringing a lot of new faces in, while the Philadelphia 76ers are doing a lot. They signed Kelly Oubre, they re-extended Tyrese Maxey, brought in Andre Drummond, brought in Eric Gordon on a really good team-friendly deal, but obviously the big piece, Paul George is now a Philadelphia 76er. He will be teamed up with Joel Embiid, a 4-year, $212 million deal. Kenan, obviously, the 76ers are trying to do a lot this offseason. How do you assess what they've done so far?
Well, so far they've handled it perfectly. We knew after they lost to the Knicks, like Embiid wasn't healthy, Maxey had one hell of a game, but the supporting cast utterly failed. And I'm looking at Tobias Harris mostly. This man's been underperforming every time he was in a Philadelphia jersey. He's gone now. He's in Detroit for a 2-year, $52 million. You re-signed Kelly Oubre Jr., who had a really good series against the Knicks. I really like that. You re-signed Andre Drummond, a good, decent backup big. He's been in the league for about 12 years now. You know what you get from him. Eric Gordon, a sniper from 3, but obviously Paul George is the money important signing. I really like this. Gives the Sixers a big 3. But the only question I have is this going to be enough? I don't think it is. We've seen the inconsistency of Joel Embiid. We've seen the inconsistency of Paul George. Tyrese Maxey, I think outside of maybe 1 or 2 bad playoff games, he's been probably the most consistent player on the Sixers compared to those 3. And those are not shots toward Joel Embiid and Paul George. It's just facts. Let's look at Paul George. When he was in Indiana as the come up, he was playing really good basketball. Of course, he had some inconsistencies, but when you're a young player developing into a star, that's going to happen. When he was with the OKC Thunder, he had really good games, but then he had some really bad games. He gets traded to the Los Angeles Clippers. We're expecting him to win a championship with Kawhi Leonard. That never happened. You had injuries to blame. I understand that's part of the game. But Pandemic P struck 3 times in 3 separate years. The thing is with Paul George, he's a great player. When it comes to playoffs, he also develops really nicely, but it's just his inconsistency. And then you pair that with the Joel Embiid. Harry, I know Joel's not your favorite player, neither is mine, but he's a dominant player. But in the playoffs, he just seems inconsistent at times. And it's just like, how can these guys win a championship if the most consistent player is a Tyrese Maxey, a Kelly Oubre Jr.? That just doesn't line up because the Boston Celtics, you're not going to beat the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. You're going to be lucky to go to 5 because they are not arguably, the best team in the NBA right now. The Milwaukee Bucks, You're not going to beat Giannis and Dame. Giannis, in my opinion, better player than anybody on the Sixers. He can guard 1 through 5. I'm not going to talk about Giannis because he's my favorite player, and I don't want to get this off. But the thing about the Philadelphia 76ers, they just have to learn how to play unselfishly, because I see a lot of times they just play hero ball with Embiid. Oh, Embiid's going to get us. Embiid's going to get us. With Paul George, that kind of eases off the tension of Joel Embiid's shoulders, eases the tensions off of Tyrese Maxey. I like this pickup. I'm not sure how it's going to do, because you have the Knicks who are getting better. You have the Celtics who are the Celtics. You have the Bucks. You have the Magic. I'm not sure if this is going to take them to an NBA Finals, potentially an Eastern Conference Finals, but I just don't see them winning a championship with this big three.
The Sixers are such an interesting team in this Joel Embiid era. You go back, I go back to 2018-19. They brought in Tobias Harris. They brought in Jimmy Butler. That was the year they lost in Game 7 on that buzzer beater to the Raptors. They had a choice. They could either keep Tobias Harris or Butler. Both of them were going to get huge paydays. They let go of Butler. They keep Harris. He's a solid player. It just hasn't worked out. He hasn't gotten them where they wanted to go. Obviously, Jimmy Butler has since gotten the Heat to two NBA Finals. So you replace Tobias Harris now with Paul George. You had James Harden too. That didn't work out. You trade him to LA. There's no secret the Sixers have brought in tremendous talent around Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid is a tremendous talent, like him or not.
100%.
But Embiid has injury issues in the playoffs and consistency issues. Harden, same thing. Harden's got a reputation. Some are calling him the second or biggest choker in NBA history, along with Karl Malone. Paul George, same thing. Paul George is a great player, a great two-way player, which doesn't get enough credit. But, you just mentioned it. You were expecting championships with the Clippers. He and Kawhi Leonard, it was injury issues, but that's an issue. They haven't been able to get over the hump. They made the conference finals once, lost to the Suns in 2021. So it's not a matter of do the Sixers have the talent. It's a matter of do they have the right structure to win in the playoffs. I'm kind of with you. I don't know if this is going to get them over that hump. I think they're still in that second tier with teams like the Knicks, with the Heat, but I think the Bucks, when healthy, should be a tier above them. The Celtics, obviously the best team in the league. So my question to you is, looking at the way the Sixers are built right now, is it something that they need to bring in to help them get over that hump? Is it another depth piece? Or is it just looking Paul George and Joel Embiid in the eye and say, this is your team, you've got to find a way?
It's that second one. We've mentioned the pieces that the Philadelphia 76ers have brought in the past, but none of them have been better than Paul George. I mean, I love two-way players. Like, for me, if you can give me 30 a night and lock up the best player on the other team, that is what I want out of a superstar. I think it's just going to take some time. But the thing is, the 76ers, they don't have time for them to develop. They have to, on day one, they just have to play like they've been playing for the last 3 to 4 years together. And we've seen this time and time again that just doesn't happen. It's a little learning curve. Paul George can make the biggest impact in the game, but it's just like if he's shooting bad, if Embiid's shooting bad, and Maxey's having an okay game, and it's just, can that be enough? I don't think it will be. I don't think it is. They could prove me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's about consistency. Something that the Philadelphia 76ers haven't had since the 70s and 80s with Irving, Malone, not Karl Malone, Moses Malone. Just clearing it up for our viewers who who never ever watched Moses Malone. But that's the thing. Like, if your best consistent players come from 20, 30, 40 years ago, then you got a problem. I think Embiid, Maxey, and George, they have to sit down and be like, look, this we don't got a lot more chances left. Paul George, he's 33, Embiid's 30. Maxey, he has time, but Embiid and George, they don't want to end their careers without their championship ring, so they're gonna have to day one just put the foot on the gas pedal. They have to manage themselves. Don't go too hard in the regular season. And I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash with that, but why risk an injury? Like, Embiid had a knee injury, I think a month and a half before the season was over, and he was just pushing himself. I also think it's a little bit on the coaching staff to reel these players in just a little bit. Like, hey, we love it. We love the enthusiasm, the intensity. But save that for the playoffs, big fella. We don't want you getting hurt because, in my opinion, if Embiid didn't get hurt, the Knicks, they're not making the Pacers. The Pacers would lose to the 76ers if Embiid was playing. Obviously, the 76ers would lose to the Boston Celtics, but that would have been one hell of a series. We would have probably seen 6, 7 at the 7 likely as well. But 76ers, what they have to do, day one, jump on it, get everything right. In the same way for this coaching staff, reel the players in just a little bit. Don't overspend their energy because once they're on that brink, injuries happen. The worst things happen. Key to 76ers, play the hard defense, stay consistent, no injuries. That's it. And if they do that, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, no question.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Sixers, you hate talking about load management, but if the Sixers want to win a championship, they gotta absolutely make sure that George and Embiid are staying healthy. Embiid's a great player; he's an MVP candidate when healthy. But if he can't stay healthy, the Sixers are going nowhere. Sacrifice the accolades. You've got your MVP. You're making hundreds of millions of dollars. You've got all the accolades and success that you could ask for besides postseason success, which matters, which is why we have you to begin with. So if you need to park the bus a little bit, sit him for a couple games at a time. A lot of people are going to hate it, but you got to do what you got to do to win a championship. So it'll be really interesting to see what'll happen with the 76ers. They're one of the most talked about teams in the league for a reason. We'll get to them plenty throughout this offseason, throughout this NBA season. But I want to ask you about a couple other signings. Obviously, it's only July 1st. It's 2:17 Eastern time right now. So, there's still plenty to go this offseason.
Right.
But some interesting ones to me. Isaiah Hartenstein, who was kind of a darling of last season with the New York Knicks, he goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, 3 years, $87 million. Chris Paul is another interesting one. That might be the most interesting, going to the San Antonio Spurs. Great pick and roll guy for Victor Wembanyama, 1 year, $11 million. But I think the one I want to ask you about the most, the Magic getting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 3 years, $66 million. Pope was obviously a really great depth piece on that super, super good Denver Nuggets team that won the championship in 2023. What are the Magic getting in KCP that they didn't have before?
You're getting a winner, end all be all. This guy has championship experience, not only with the Denver Nuggets, with the Los Angeles Lakers as well. He brings a 3-and-D play style. He knows what it takes to take that team to the next level. And he's going to be such a great mentor to the Cole Anthonys, the Anthony Blacks, KCP, Wendell Carter Jr. They're always going to. I also like Wendell Carter Jr. I just had to mention that he's a really good center. But KCP, he brings that experience. And then you have Markelle Fultz, Gary Harris, Cole Anthony. And you got just this veteran locker room. Because, yes, I think the oldest player on the Magic right now is Joe Ingles. But you don't, and this is no disrespect to Joe Ingles, how much of a impact does he have compared to a veteran that has 2 championship rings? That's just pure basic sense. So I really like the pickup by the Magic. I mean, I don't think KCP is going to be starting. I think he's definitely going to be the 6th man off the bench. When they were in that Cleveland series, they really didn't have anybody to guard Donovan Mitchell, who was just fantastic. Darius Garland. Yeah, you had Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, but they would just seem like a step behind. KCP is an improvement on the defensive end. He'll give you 10 a game, but he'll also prevent other players from knocking down shots. That's a big, big plus. We honestly thought, you and me, Harry, we discussed Klay Thompson to the Magic. That's not happening. I don't know where Klay's going to end up now. But Hartenstein to the Thunder, I really like that pickup. The Thunder have been doing everything right. You bring in Alex Caruso, you get rid of Josh Giddey. Caruso, phenomenal defender, phenomenal athlete, gives you effort every night. Pair that with Shai, pair that with Chet, Isaiah Joe, the Williams. They also got a really good prospect in Nikolai Topic from Serbia. He's going to be really good for them one day. But then you got Aaron Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins' is older brother, I think. I don't, maybe. But then you also have Kenrich Williams. This team, with the addition of Caruso, that was great. But then you bring in Hartenstein, a big-bodied center that the Thunder were lacking. And this is no disrespect to Holmgren. Holmgren is one hell of a player. That's my twin. But he just And this is nothing against him. He's just too small come playoff time. Kyrie and Luka were piecing him up every time they drove. You have Hartenstein, who's 7 foot, I think 240, 250, a big bodied German who loves to play physical, plays in that little 10 to 12 feet from the rim, gives you enough space, and I really like that pickup as well for Thunder. And I might have the Thunder coming out of the West next year.
Wow, this early in the Thunder window, that'd be really interesting to see. I mean,
Yeah,
they've got the pieces.
they have the pieces. They have more time to develop those pieces compared to the 76ers. The Magic have enough time as well to develop their pieces. I really like the pairing of Banchero, excuse me, and Franz Wagner. I really do think those two guys are going to run the East one day. Not right now, but definitely one day. But so far, Thunder, the Magic have been checking their boxes. Great picks all around.
Yeah, one guy that you mentioned that I wanted to ask you about was Klay Thompson. But it seems like a sure thing now. His tenure with the Golden State Warriors is over. There were a lot of people that were connecting him with the Orlando Magic. Obviously, even though he's had a rough stretch since his torn ACL, at worst, he's a top 5 shooter in NBA history, especially on the spot up. Can play some pretty solid defense from the 2 spot. Of an oversized shooting guard, too, at 6'7". He's being linked now to teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks. I want to ask you if there's any team that's really contending that you think could reasonably get Klay Thompson. Where do you think he fits in the best?
Well, the decline of Klay Thompson is sad to see. Those ACL injuries, MCL injuries, really took away a lot of his game, not only just on the offensive side, but on the defensive side as well. His lateral movement is declining. I was watching clips of him last year compared to prior the injuries, and you can clearly see he's a step slower. The only team I can see him do something is the Los Angeles Lakers. And LeBron, earlier today, it came out that he's willing to take a pay cut to get a Klay Thompson, to get a James Harden, who re-signed with the Clippers. He wanted to get Jonas Valanciunas as well, but he's with the Wizards. I mean, it has to be the Lakers. I don't think the Mavericks are going to attempt to sign Klay Thompson because they just signed Najee Marshall from the Pelicans. Really young shooting guard, averages 7 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists on 39% shooting from three. I think the only place that makes sense for Klay Thompson right now is the Los Angeles Lakers because they need shooting. You're in a win now era with the Lakers because LeBron, he's going to be 40. I think December 30th or 29th. I
30th.
can't tell you off the top of my head. I know it's one of those days. You have Anthony Davis, who, when healthy, I've said this time and time again, he's a top 5 player in the league. You get Bronny James, Dalton Connect out the draft. I don't think Bronny James is going to see the court a lot. Okay, I know a lot of people is going to say, "Oh, Bronny and Braun, they're going to no stop. They're going to play 5 games together, and Bronny's going to get sent down to the G League and warm the bench." Dalton Connect, I can already see him playing a big part. Austin Reeves, big part, and then you bring in a Klay Thompson to mentor these guys. I mean, Reeves can easily become a better shooter and a better defender because you have Klay Thompson, who was part of that Warriors dynasty, who basically dominated the mid 2010s of the NBA. You have Dalton Connect, who's a sponge. I watched him at Tennessee. He's going to if the Lakers get it, he's just going to love that. Jalen Hood Schifino as well. Just all these young players that just can benefit off that. I don't think D'Angelo Russell will be part of that. I do see him going somewhere. I do think you can get a solid point guard out of D'Lo, but Lakers definitely 100%. That is the team that Klay Thompson will end up with by next week.
I think if you get a guy like Klay Thompson, obviously his go-to is a spot-up shot. 60 points on 11 dribbles. We know all we need to know about Klay Thompson. I think if you get a guy like him, you don't need a D'Angelo Russell on a point guard because D'Angelo Russell is almost too much of a scorer at the one. You just need a straight-up distributor. Chris Paul would have been a fantastic get for them just because he's more than happy scoring 8 points a game but getting 11 rebounds and just moving the rock when need be. So I do think that if you do get a guy like Klay Thompson, it would make sense to move on from a guy like D'Angelo Russell, who's not a bad player. It's just kind of like we said with the 76ers. It's just a matter of fit. Right before we go, I want to ask you, you mentioned Giannis is your favorite player. We know you're a big Milwaukee Bucks fan. Is there a move? Is there kind of a direction that you would like to see happen this offseason after another rough first round exit with Giannis and Lillard both having injuries?
Well,
You can't say firing Doc Rivers either.
no, unfortunately he's going to be part of this team for next 2-3 years. Unfortunately, look, the Milwaukee Bucks, they've been my team since I was 11 years old. I remember picking up 2K11, the Brandon Jennings, Monty Ellis, Andrew Bogut Big Three, and we absolutely stunk it this draft. Okay, first in the first round we had the 23rd pick. We get AJ Johnson, who was 2 years ago supposed to be a projected lottery pick, and he played. He originally committed to Texas, but after a minutes dispute, he decommitted and wanted to play in Australia against the pros. I get that, but you don't run from the grind. You play 7 minutes a game over there. You get injured, and yet somehow you're still the 23rd pick. Really, Joe Hurst? Really? Look, I wanted a backup center for Brook Lopez, and I would have loved to have Kyle Flipowski. I feel like that guy and Brook, I think Brook would have mentored him perfectly because he plays extremely like a young Brook Lopez, down low, and just he's a physical body. He loves to bang around. I think that would have been the perfect. I also wanted what's his name coming out of Illinois, Terrence Shannon Jr. I think that would have been an extreme upgrade from Pat Cunningham. I wanted Kolek as well. I wanted Kel Ware, the one that Miami picked up. I was like, damn, he's going to be a star for them one day. But coming into the Bucks free agency, we just signed Dalton Wright, and that's not a needle mover. You know, he's been around the league. He has very good perimeter defense. That's what we needed. But if let's say Thanasis gets sent to Chicago, he's basically taken over the Thanasis role. He's not going to see a lot of playing time. I definitely want Mo Bamba. I think Mo Bamba, like his athleticism, pairs up well with Giannis. He can space the floor, stretch the floor a little bit. Very good rebounder, very good defender. I feel like with Brook Lopez getting up there in age, we have to look at centers. I would love for us to get Mo Bamba. Are we going to get him? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, but I would love to get him. But it's just, I don't know who we're going to get outside of Wright. We were supposed to get Marshall, the one that just signed with the Mavericks, but he obviously he's no longer an option. It was a 3-year, $27 million. I don't think we have the cap space for that. Maybe Dennis Smith Jr. Chris Dunn is linked to us. I would like us to consider Josh Okogie from the Suns. He's a really good perimeter defender. We are also supposed to get Eric Gordon. That's not happening anymore.
That would have been a really good get.
He would have fixed some issues, but not the issues we need. I don't know who's next, but if I'm the Bucks, we need a backup center. It has to either be Mo Bamba or Goga Biazzi, the Magic backup, best known for sitting next to Zion Williamson during that draft interview combine, and basically everyone was around him. No one was around him. But yeah, either Mo Bamba or Goga. I mean, we got Delon Wright. Chris Dunn, maybe. But if we already got Wright, then what's the point of getting Dunn? Like, I don't know. Like, are we going to make some trades? Are we going to get rid of Brook? Because the Lakers are looking at Brook. I was scrolling on Twitter this morning after my breakfast, and I was like, okay, if we can get maybe Rui, a pick, and Vanderbilt, I would love that. I think Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura would thrive in our system, but that still doesn't solve the center problem. We got to get a center, please, Joe. If you're listening, give me Mo Bamba. Like 2018, Mo Bamba was hype. Okay, let's bring that back to Milwaukee.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's midway through the day on July 1st. Plenty of time for free agency transactions to go down. We got 3 months until the NBA season, so Kenan, I'm sure we'll have you back on the show a couple times before the season tips off in October. So thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Of course, brother, it's my pleasure. And stay tuned for Harry's next segment, everyone.
Yeah, we'll see it. Kenan Bjelevac on the Harry Loomis Show. Coming up after the break, we will discuss a wild race in Nashville, Tennessee. We'll recap the Ally 400 and preview the Chicago Street Course. Stay tuned. We are back on the Harry Loomis Show, and you gotta love timing in the middle of the day during free agency, just after getting off the interview with Kenan Bjelevac. Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting that Klay Thompson will be signing with the Dallas Mavericks, a 3-year, $50 million contract for Klay Thompson, adding another weapon to a team headlined by Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic that came 3 wins away from winning an NBA championship last year. Very interested to see how that turns out. But we turn our attention to NASCAR. The Cup Series was in Nashville Superspeedway this weekend for the Ally 400. Man, that was a race. That's about all you can say with that race. A record 5 overtimes, a Cup Series record at the very least, to decide this race. 300 laps were scheduled. This race ended up going 331, which I don't think I've ever seen before. You know, I remember seeing Martinsville races go 15, 20 laps over the scheduled distance and thinking that was ridiculous. This is a mile and a third track, and you went 31 extra laps. Crazy. I mean, it's a dubious record, but it's a record nonetheless. You know, I saw Jeff Gluck's poll earlier, the Good Race poll, and I think it was about 73% said yes. I'm honestly surprised by that. I personally voted no. I was not a fan of that finish. I thought it was too sloppy. I don't like seeing the best drivers in stock car racing, all of stock car racing, not able to complete a lap. It was frustrating to watch. You know, there's something about a deserved winner, and Christopher Bell probably had the best car, deserved to win that race. He pit midway through stage 3, was trying to make his way back up the track, got loose behind Austin Dillon, spun his car out, cost him a chance. After that, Denny Hamlin had the second best car, and whereas Tyler Reddick was right there battling with them and had a bad restart, wasn't able to get back up towards the lead, Hamlin was making a charge on Ross Chastain, passed him with under 10 laps to go. Wasn't fully driving away, but Chastain didn't have enough to come back. Hamlin was going to hold on and win that race. Looked just like Kansas, honestly, back in May. And on brand, a caution came out with 2 laps to go. Contact between Noah Gragson and Austin Cindric sent Cindric spinning around. Hamlin saying, "You got to be kidding me." He had the race won on about 2 straight restarts, but fuel was a problem. There were a couple wrecks. Ross Chastain got taken out. Kyle Busch got taken out. There was a wreck in the back. It was just a sloppy finish. And then the leaders having to pit because, you know, obviously, what are you doing pitting for the lead? You have a chance to win the race. There's 2 laps to go. Ran out of fuel. Joey Logano, Chase Briscoe ended up battling for the lead. A little bit of contact there. Briscoe wasn't too happy with how Logano raced him, which tells me he's going to fit in perfectly over at Joe Gibbs Racing, because name me a Joe Gibbs driver that hasn't had an issue with Joey Logano at some point. But once again, Logano got the better of it on this day, got that held onto the lead on the last restart. Looked like Tyler Reddick's race to lose. He finally got that track position back. He was flying on the second to last lap, went to the inside on turn 3, just couldn't do it. He could not get there. Logano, running on fumes, was able to hold off a car on much faster tires that had no concerns with fuel. I don't know. Is that a good thing? Is that something you want to see? I mean, credit to Logano. He did a great job. That you're supposed to go 80 laps on fuel at Nashville, and he went 110. Incredible work by Logano. Incredible work by Paul Wolfe. They're in the playoffs now. They've had a really bad year for their standards up until this. Logano gets his first points win since March 2023 at Atlanta. Zane Smith ends up second. By far the best day of Zane Smith's career. He hadn't had a top 10 finish, I don't think, all year long. Lowest in the standings among full-time drivers, and he finished second. You know, you don't want to say for a rookie that that's a career-saving race, but just looking at the trajectory of his team and his situation, he's not coming back to the 71. Michael McDowell's in that car. Trackhouse hasn't yet acquired a third charter. It's likely they're going to from Stewart Haas. But Shane Van Gisbergen is the other option. He's got 2 wins in the Xfinity Series this year. It's not a guarantee that Zane Smith was going to have a ride within Trackhouse next year the way this season had gone. So a second place finish for him is huge. Hopefully they're able to build off that. Tyler Reddick finishes third. Another guy with a lot of uncertainty, Ryan Preece, came home fourth. He's likely not going to be the pick for that Haas team that's coming back in 2025. He's probably got the most uncertainty surrounding his name than any other driver with Stewart Haas Racing right now. So really good to see him get a top 5 on an intermediate track where he's kind of struggled so far. And Chris Buescher rounds out the top 5. Pretty topsy-turvy race in general. But once again, in my mind, it just got tainted by those late restarts. Obviously, running out of fuel is going to happen. There's things out of your control, but it's the carnage. It's just the wrecking that is frustrating. Some of them are racing deals, but at some point, you got to be able to make a lap, man. You know what I mean? You can live with 1 to 2 restarts, but 5 in any situation, it's a bad look. It's not good racing. It's not what NASCAR should be promoting. It's not something we should be hoping to see, not something we should be expecting to see. That finish, I told some of my friends, we could have gotten a replay of the Kansas finish, closest finish in history. But instead, we might as well have gotten the Truck Series race at Phoenix last year. Maybe the worst race I've ever seen, given the circumstances. So, Nashville, once again, put on a great crowd. Awesome command by Hardy. Luke Combs coming out to drive the pace car was a really cool thing. Nashville does it right. I don't think it's going to move to the playoffs, but I feel like Nashville would be a home run for a playoff race, or move it to a Saturday night, make it a night race, because, you saw Cool Suits failing in the Xfinity race and Cup race. It's not safe for the fans. It's not safe for the drivers. I get it's a attrition sport, but you shouldn't be putting anybody at actual risk by just running a race. I've been to races in the summer in Chicago, in Kansas, in St. Louis. It can be brutal. So I think Sunday night race last year was awesome. I would be fine with it being a Sunday night race, even a Saturday night race in the future. But I don't think there's any reason to keep this race at a 2:30 slot on Sunday afternoon in June. I think something's got to change. But, a lot of people weren't sure about Nashville when it first came onto the schedule in 2021. It's just gotten better over time. The racing has gotten really, really good. The crowd is fantastic. It's the best market NASCAR could be in right now. It's crazy that it took us until 2021 for the Cup Series to come here to begin with, just with how big of a party town, how much of a destination city Nashville is. They're doing a great job. They're in it for the long haul, whether we keep the super speedway or we get something figured out with the fairgrounds. I'm all for it. But moving on now, next week, we have the Grant Park 165. We are going back to the Chicago street course. The weather looks a lot better than it did last year with, one of the craziest races we've ever seen in every which way. Single file restarts, wet weather tires, a new track to begin with, and on top of it, a guy in his debut winning a Shane Van Gisbergen. Who knows what's going to happen this year? We really don't know what to base it off of because we didn't have a normal race last year. So this almost feels like an inaugural event in a way. I don't see the same hype just for being in the Chicago area, being on the street as we did last year. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. I am really curious to see what the crowd looks like for this year. And if it doesn't have the same buzz as it did last year, who knows if people got turned off because of, the festivities around the race getting canceled because of the insane torrential downpour we got. I really hope that didn't turn fans off from coming to the track. But if they did, I think there's a place for street racing in NASCAR, but I don't think it needs to be in Chicago. If this isn't working at some point, I think NASCAR needs to explore moving this around to different big cities. I think you've got to continue to adapt. I think the biggest failure with the Coliseum is that they kept it there for too long. They didn't add anything to the experience. The experience was pretty much the same. Music and a show. You get a live concert. You get some racing at the Coliseum. First year, it looked awesome. Second year, under the lights, it looked awesome. Third year, just kind of bland. Just kind of the same race. Just felt like more of an inconvenience, if anything, for the teams having to go all the way out to California before the 500 for a race that doesn't even mean anything. So I think they can't make the same mistakes with Chicago. See how the crowd looks this year. If it's not working, look elsewhere. Start negotiating with new cities. We don't owe Chicago a race. Bring back the Speedway if you want to, but I think you just got to keep looking. if you want to pick for this race, I made my picks before the season started. You can find that on my YouTube channel. I think Ross Chastain is due for a win. He's got to win on a road course. Again, I know this is technically a street course. It's not a road course. In NASCAR, turning right to me kind of counted as the same. Chastain has won its Dakota. Trackhouse won, obviously, the Chicago race last year with SVG. Chastain's been knocking on the door. This week was a really surprising showing from him. He didn't really have much speed throughout the race, but put himself in a position to possibly win that race late. He was leading with under 10 laps to go, was doing a really good job holding off Denny Hamlin until he got aero loose. I think Chastain's due. I don't think he's going to go into the playoffs without a win. I think it's going to come sooner rather than later. I'll make it my pick to win the Chicago Street Course. So that's going to be really interesting to see. We will obviously be recapping that race next week. As the season rolls on, we are officially past the halfway point in the NASCAR Cup Series season. It's been flying by. I don't think there's any clear-cut championship favorite. You've got, 4 guys with 3 wins now? Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, William Byron, and now Christopher Bell. Penske, we were talking about how much they've struggled this year. Now all 3 of their guys have won in this past month. Cindric won in St. Louis. Blaney won in Iowa. Logano won in Nashville. That Logano win really flips things on its head. Logano was outside, right on the outside looking into the playoffs. He was right on that bubble. Now he's locked in. All of a sudden now Alex Bowman's the last guy in, but he's 51 points to the good of Bubba Wallace, ahead of guys like Kyle Busch, Chase Briscoe, Josh Berry. Are we done seeing unique winners? I don't think so. We've got 7 races left until the playoffs start. Who on the bubble is going to work their way out of it and get a win and get themselves in the playoffs? There are more than 16 really good teams in the Cup Series, which means some guys are going to have to miss. We saw how crazy it was in 2022. We're not going to see quite that with Martin Truex being top 5 in points and missing it. But who knows what's going to happen? You can look at one race and say that there's 20 guys with a chance to win. That means 4 guys that aren't in the playoffs right now could have a chance to win a race. You know, you got Daytona in the regular season, not the finale. Darlington is the finale. This is really going to be an interesting 7 weeks to see who makes it, but we will be here for all of it. We're going to wrap up the show right there. This has been the first ever episode of the Harry Loomis Show. We should be back pretty soon. We'll get a consistent schedule going along as we progress. Want to thank you guys for watching. Click like, click subscribe. Make sure you check out the next episode. Thank you guys.